"You're not my dad. I only answer to Mom." That was the first sentence Ryan ever gave me in this house. Not a greeting, not a handshake, just a challenge, spat out with the careless cruelty only a 16-year-old boy can master. He said it with his shoulders squared, his chin tilted in defiance, as if my very presence offended him. His eyes, dark and steady, drilled into me like a warning. "You don't belong here, and you never will." Caitlin didn't even bother with words. She rolled her eyes, scoffed, and left her cereal bowl dripping milk on the counter. It was a small act of dismissal, but it landed heavier than any insult. She was 15, already fluent in silent contempt. That morning, she walked away as if I were a ghost passing through a kitchen that didn't belong to me. I had married Melissa 3 years earlier, believing in the dream of building something whole out of fractured parts. Houston was our canvas. Wide freeways, endless subdivisions, houses with manicured lawns that all looked the same. It was supposed to be a place where we could blend into normality, where our wounds could scab over quietly. I came with 2 children of my own. Jake, 9, all restless energy and stubborn questions, and Ellie, 11, tender, watchful, clinging still to the fragile belief that family meant safety. Melissa brought her teenagers, Ryan and Caitlin, who were rawer, harder, their edges sharpened by divorce and by Tom, her ex-husband, their father. He hovered just a few neighborhoods away, like an unspoken threat, a shadow that stretched over our house even when he wasn't there. He saw them twice a month, sometimes less, but in their eyes he was still the real father. My role, by comparison, was ornamental. Still, I believed I could win them over. Not with grand gestures, not with empty words, but with consistency. I became the man who never failed to show up. When Ryan needed cleats for football, I bought them. When Caitlin needed new shoes for her dance recital, I wrote the check. I covered their school trips, their gadgets, their endless demands that came with a price tag. I thought of it as an investment, not in things but in trust. I cooked dinners and drove carpools. I patched the holes in drywall after Ryan lost his temper and punched the wall. I paid for the streaming services they binged after slamming their bedroom doors. I convinced myself that step by step, brick by brick, patience and sacrifice would build a bridge across the bloodline that separated us. But respect never came. Ryan looked through me like I was drywall, like I was part of the architecture but not worth noticing. When I asked him to mow the lawn, he smirked and walked away. When I told him to clean up after himself, he pretended not to hear until Melissa repeated my words, as though my voice carried no weight unless filtered through hers. Caitlin was subtler, but sharper in her way. She ignored me completely, a wall of silence that felt colder than open hostility. When I walked into the room, her conversations ended. When I asked her to help set the table, she left the room without answering. When Melissa asked instead, she smiled and complied, as though she hadn't heard me at all. And Melissa, God help me, she excused it. She said they were adjusting, that teenagers were like this, that it would take time. She called their rejection normal. She said it wasn't personal. But every smirk, every silence, every deliberate cut of the eyes told me it was. It was personal. It was targeted. It was a rejection of me, the man who was keeping the lights on, paying the mortgage, feeding them, clothing them. From the beginning, I knew Tom's ghost lived in our home. Every time I tried to lay down rules, Ryan's eyes said, "You're not him." Every time Caitlin dismissed me, her silence screamed, "You'll never be him." He was their father by blood, even if he only showed up to take them to lunch once in a while. I was the stranger they tolerated under their roof, the man who was useful but not worthy of respect. At first, I called it adjustment. Later, I realized it was rejection. It didn't happen all at once. It was death by 1,000 cuts. The muttered jokes under their breath. The way Ryan slammed doors when I reminded him of chores. The way Caitlin laughed at her mother's stories but sat stone-faced when I spoke. The way Melissa let it all slide, like my dignity was a fair price for her children's temporary peace. I told myself it was worth it. That family was never easy, especially a blended one. I believed that if I kept showing up, if I kept feeding them, clothing them, driving them, financing their lives. They would eventually see me for who I was. But deep down, a seed was already planted. A question I couldn't silence. How long can a man give without being acknowledged? Started small, but the contempt grew like mold. Quiet at first, then spreading into everything. Ryan learned quickly how to humiliate me without ever raising his voice. At dinner, when I served the food, he would lean back in his chair, glance at his sister, then ask Melissa, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Mom, is it okay if we eat this?" As though my cooking were poison until blessed by her approval. Caitlin laughed the first time. After that, it became routine. My meals were never real until Melissa nodded. Caitlin found her own ways. She left messes everywhere. Clothes piled in corners, empty cups abandoned in the living room, half-finished plates crusting over on the coffee table. When I asked her to clean up, she didn't even look at me, just said flatly, "Mom didn't tell me to," like my words weren't sound, like they weren't even noise. But the worst was when it spilled over to my own children. Jake was 9, full of stubborn pride, but he came to me one evening with his fists balled and his eyes burning. "Ryan took my stuff again," he said. And when I told him to give it back, he said, "Your dad doesn't make rules here. He's nobody." Nobody. That word cut deeper than anything Ryan had said to me directly. Because it wasn't just me he was erasing, it was Jake and Ellie too. My children were learning that in this house, their father's voice meant nothing. That the man who tucked them in, who drove them to school, who paid for the roof over their heads, was considered invisible. I confronted Melissa about it that night, my voice low but sharp. "Do you hear what he's teaching them? That I'm nobody? That my rules don't matter? You let him spit in my face in front of my kids." She sighed, weary, already defeated. "They're teenagers, Andrew. They're angry. They'll grow out of it." Grow out of it. As if contempt were just acne. As if my children could endure years of seeing their father mocked and erased and walk away untouched. The weeks bled into months, each day marked by new slights. Ryan refused chores. Caitlin mocked the way I spoke. At family gatherings, they whispered to each other, smirking, while I sat beside them, pretending not to notice. My patience, once a reservoir, began to run dry. Then came the night Ryan went too far. Ellie had been saving for months, collecting allowance, birthday money, every spare dollar. She had begged me for a laptop, not for games, but for school, for writing, for the drawings she scattered across her notebooks like they were prayers. I had helped her, matching every dollar she saved, until the day came when she finally had enough. I took her to the store, watched her eyes light up when she held it in her hands. It wasn't top of the line, but it was hers. Her pride, her proof that effort built something real. One evening, after a long day, Ellie came crying into the kitchen. The words tumbled out between sobs. "He broke it. He smashed it. He said it was stupid." I went cold. I found Ryan in the living room, slouched on the couch, scrolling through his phone as if nothing had happened. Ellie's laptop lay in pieces on the floor. The screen cracked like shattered glass, keys scattered across the rug. "Why?" I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. He looked up at me, smirked, and leaned back. "Because she wouldn't let me use it. She said it was hers. Thought she was better than me." My hands shook. "You destroyed something she worked for, something I helped her buy. You owe her an apology." Ryan laughed, sharp and ugly. "You don't get it, do you? You're not even a man if you let us live however we want. You're nothing." The words landed like a hammer. Not just disrespect. Not just defiance. A direct challenge. He was daring me to react, daring me to prove myself. Melissa rushed in then, saw the broken laptop, heard the rising tension. "Ryan," she snapped, "go upstairs." He shrugged, sauntered past me, his shoulder brushing mine deliberately hard. Up the stairs he went, unpunished, unrepentant, leaving shards of Ellie's dreams scattered across the rug. Ellie stood in the doorway, tears streaking her face, clutching the empty case of what had been hers. Jake hovered behind her, silent, his small body stiff with confusion and anger. And me? I stood there, staring at the wreckage, and realized something had snapped inside me too. That was the breaking point. The next morning, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam doors. I didn't demand apologies that would never come. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table before dawn, the house silent around me, and I opened my laptop. Ryan thought I was nobody. He thought I had no rights, no power. But every subscription, every bill, every allowance, every car payment, they all carried my name, my signature, my labor. And a man who controls the money is never nobody. I started with the allowance. Ryan had been receiving cash each week like clockwork. Money he used for fast food, games, and whatever else teenagers burn through without thought. I cut it off. Not postponed. Not delayed. Gone. I pulled up the account linked to his prepaid card and drained it to zero. Then the car. Melissa had convinced me months ago to let Ryan use the old sedan we kept as a spare. He needs independence, she had said. It'll help him mature. What it did was give him more opportunities to sneer at me as he slammed the door. That morning, I took the keys from the bowl by the door and locked them in my desk. The insurance policy, canceled. His independence had expired. Next came the invisible luxuries, the ones he never saw but always used. The phone line under my account. The streaming services. The Wi-Fi router I had installed myself. One by one I pulled the plugs. Passwords changed. Auto payments ended. Silence where there used to be endless scrolling and background noise. Each click felt cleaner than the last. Not rage, not revenge, clarity. Ryan wanted to live without me? Then he could. He could test what life felt like stripped of the comforts I had been foolish enough to provide. But I didn't stop with him. No, this time Melissa had to carry what she had refused to face. I opened the folder where I tracked the household expenses, groceries, utilities, school fees, repairs. Every debt Ryan had racked up, every broken gadget, every subscription I had absorbed quietly, I printed and stacked on the counter. Melissa's pile. Melissa's responsibility. For years, she had treated my labor like background noise, the hum of an engine that never failed. She thought the house ran itself, that money simply appeared because I worked without complaint. But today she would see it in black and white. By the time the sun rose, my decision was complete. The locks on the house had been changed, the spare keys no longer fit. I called Tom, their father, and told him flatly, "Your kids can stay with you until they learn respect." There was silence on the line, then a heavy sigh. He didn't argue. He knew. He had heard the stories from his own children, their smug claims that I meant nothing. He knew this wasn't a tantrum. This was a reckoning. By evening, the storm broke. Ryan came downstairs first, frowning at his dead phone. "What's wrong with the Wi-Fi?" I didn't look up from my coffee. "Ask your father." His frown deepened. "The car's gone. Where are the keys?" "Ask your father." Melissa entered then, her eyes darting from my calm face to the neat stack of bills on the counter. She picked them up, flipping through pages of numbers she had never cared to know. Her voice wavered. "What is this?" "Everything I've been covering for Ryan. Everything you should have seen." Her hands trembled. "Andrew, you can't just..." I cut her off, my voice like ice. "I can." And I did. The front door opened then, and Tom appeared, shoulders slumped, eyes wary. Ryan froze, confusion flickering into disbelief. "What's he doing here?" "He's your father," I said flatly. "He's here to take you and your sister until you learn how to respect this house." Caitlin appeared at the top of the stairs, her eyes wide, phone clutched in her hand. She must have heard enough to understand. She whispered, "Mom?" like a child asking for permission. But Melissa had no words. She stood in the kitchen with the weight of those bills in her hands, her face pale, her silence louder than any plea. Ryan's smirk faltered for the first time. "You can't do this," he said, his voice cracking. "You're not even." I stood then, pushing back my chair. My voice was steady, deliberate, final. "I'm not your father, remember? That's what you wanted. So now your real father will take care of you." Tom gestured awkwardly for them to gather their things. Ryan protested. Caitlin cried, Melissa tried to form excuses, but in the end, they left. Bags stuffed, shoes clattering down the stairs, the front door closing behind them. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't emptiness. It was relief. Melissa turned to me, her voice raw. "Andrew, this isn't fair. They're just kids." I met her eyes, cold and unflinching. "They're not just kids. They're your kids. And for years, I carried them while they spat on me. That ends today." She opened her mouth to argue again, but then she looked down at the stack of bills in her hand, at the mountain she had ignored while I shouldered it alone. And for the first time, she had no words. That night, Jake and Ellie slept soundly for the first time in months. No slamming doors, no sneers, no whispers that their father was nobody, just quiet. I sat alone in the living room, the echo of Ryan's last smirk still burning in my chest. But beneath it, there was something else. Not peace, not yet, but control. For the first time, the house felt like mine. The line had been drawn, and I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. 2 weeks. That's how long the silence lasted after Tom drove them away. At first, I thought the peace would feel empty. I expected the quiet to gnaw at me, to echo with guilt. But it didn't. Felt clean. The house was lighter without Ryan's footsteps stomping down the stairs, without Caitlin's sharp laughter cutting across the rooms. For the first time in years, Jake and Ellie walked freely through their home. No one stole their toys. No one sneered at their father in front of them. At night, when I tucked them in, I saw relief in their eyes. Safety had returned. Melissa was different. She moved through the house like a shadow, torn between loyalty to her children and her disbelief at what I had done. First, she raged. "You can't just exile them. They're my kids," she shouted one night, her voice breaking, but I stood firm. "And they're Tom's responsibility, not mine," I replied. "If they won't respect me, they won't live under my roof." After that, she went quiet. She cooked, she cleaned, she went to work, but her eyes carried a wound she didn't speak aloud. Then the phone calls started. Ryan, at first, tried to mask his desperation with anger. He called Melissa late at night, his voice sharp, demanding. "Mom, the Wi-Fi at Dad's place **CKs. He won't pay for my phone bill. Tell Andrew to fix it. Tell him to stop being petty." I sat across from her as she held the phone, her eyes darting to me. She wanted to soften it, wanted to translate his insults into pleas. But I shook my head. And when she hesitated too long, Ryan hung up. Caitlin's calls were different. She cried. She said Tom's house was too small, too messy, that she missed her room, her bed, the streaming services, the heat that didn't sputter out in the middle of the night. She begged Melissa to talk to me, to convince me to let them come home. Melissa's hands trembled as she repeated their words to me. "They want to come back. Andrew, maybe if you just—" "No," I said. "Not without conditions." Days passed. The calls grew more frequent. Tom himself even came by once, his face haggard, his voice low. "I can't keep them like this," he admitted on the porch. "I don't have the money. They're miserable. They don't listen to me either. They want to come back." I looked him dead in the eye. "Then they come back under my rules. No more disrespect. No more spitting on me while eating food I paid for. If they break it, they're out again. Permanently." He nodded, defeated. A week later, the knock came. I opened the door to find Ryan and Caitlin standing there, bags slung over their shoulders, their faces pale with exhaustion. The arrogance that had once defined them was gone. Ryan's eyes didn't carry fire anymore. They carried fear. Caitlin's lip trembled as she whispered, "Can we come in?" Behind them stood Melissa, her eyes already wet. She looked at me like she was asking permission too. I let the silence stretch, heavy, suffocating. Then I said, "This is still my house. If you want to come back, you live by my rules. You don't roll your eyes at me. You don't mock me. You don't undermine me in front of my kids. If you can't do that, you go back to Tom tonight." Ryan swallowed hard, his voice low. "Fine." Caitlin nodded quickly, desperate. Melissa exhaled, relief flooding her. She stepped forward to hug them, but I held up a hand. Not so fast. Respect is earned daily. The moment I see it slip, the door closes again. They nodded, silent, subdued. That night, the house felt different. The tension didn't vanish. It lingered like smoke after a fire, but the balance had shifted. Ryan and Caitlin kept their heads down. They cleaned their plates. They spoke when spoken to. For the first time, I saw what fear of consequence could do. But the biggest change wasn't in them. It was in Melissa. She saw, finally, what I had been trying to show her for years. That my patience wasn't weakness. It was choice. That I had carried her children, protected them, provided for them, all while they spat on me, and I had done it because I believed in family. But belief without respect is a leash. And when I cut it, they all felt the fall. Late one night, when the house was quiet, Melissa sat beside me on the couch. She didn't speak at first, just stared at her hands. Then she whispered, "I didn't realize how much you carried, how much they needed you even while they rejected you. I thought they'd grow out of it. But you were right. They had to be shown." Her voice cracked. "I don't want to lose you." I looked at her, steady, unsparing. "Then don't let them forget this lesson. Ever." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. The days turned into weeks. Slowly, Ryan stopped glaring. Caitlin stopped rolling her eyes. It wasn't love, not yet, maybe not ever, but it was respect, the kind born out of necessity. They had tasted what life was like without me, without the comfort my labor bought them, and they didn't want to go back. Jake and Ellie noticed too. One evening, Ellie whispered to me, "Dad, it feels better now, like they can't hurt us anymore." I kissed her forehead and tucked her in, my chest heavy with something I couldn't name. The house wasn't healed. Maybe it never would be. But for the first time, the balance was right. And as I sat in the quiet after everyone had gone to bed, I thought about the cost of respect. How many years I had given, how many wounds I had swallowed, how much silence I had endured, and how, in the end, only one truth mattered. Respect is not free. It is earned. It is enforced. And if they had to learn it the hard way, so be it. So I ask you, was I wrong? Was I cruel for cutting them off, for sending them back to their father until they broke? Or was it the only way left to show them that generosity without respect is just another word for slavery? What would you have done?